Okay, let's talk about what this class is about. So I'm trying to adjust the volume of this. The last thing seemed a little bit low. Hopefully this will be bright enough. So first of all, this is an introduction to programming. But you'll notice if you look in front of you that there are, well, I'm sorry, I can't say that. I say that every year when we sit in the classroom, and I say to them, you'll notice if you look in front of you that there are no computers. There's only desks and blackboards and things like that. So this is a programming course, but it's entirely a pencil and paper programming course, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Of course, I went to say that now and realized, of course, you're online. You probably do have a computer in front of you to even watch this. So when we get into class, you'll notice that there are no computers in the class, except maybe one at the front. That's because what we're doing in this particular class doesn't actually involve a computer, although it's all about computers, of course, because it's all about programming. So let me talk more about that in just a few minutes, but let me first start by talking about why you'd be taking this at all. First of all, if you're interested in programming, and this is the first place to start. If you want to take the programming certificate here or get the programming degree, here, you would start by taking this class. That's the prereq for all the others. If you are not sure if you're interested in programming but think you might be, this is also the class to take. Because even though we don't actually get to the computers in this class, everything we do is all about programming. And you'll know by the end of this class whether this is the kind of thing you love or hate. And most people tend to do one or the other. Some people love it, some people hate it. Almost nobody is neutral about it. There are some people who are taking this just because it's an elective for something else, but still the point of the class is to teach you sort of what programming is about. It's a class about how to think more than about getting certain facts learned. So it's the point here is to get you to learn to think like a programmer. And once you have that skill, you can pull it out when you're programming, but you can also pull it out when you're doing other kinds of thinking in life. There's a lot of times where critical thinking is enhanced by knowing how a programmer would approach something. So that's that. Okay, so let's talk about where this fits in the CIS curriculum as a whole. The CIS curriculum at SOC. At SOC, the CIS department has three basic streams. Let me put the mic down for a minute and type them out. Okay, there's a stream for applications, which is mainly taught by Greg Nowak. He's the one in charge of it. A stream for networking, which is taught by a bunch of different people, including Val Boss and John Schaefer. And a stream taught by me, which is on programming, and that's me, Kevin McGill. Now, in applications, there's a gateway course, CIS 109. And what that means is if you're going to go into applications, the first course you should take is the CIS 109 course. You don't necessarily need any other computer background to take it, but that's the first thing you take. And then from there, you proceed to take more complicated stuff afterwards. Applications is all about knowing how to be sort of a power user for things like a Word and Excel and database software and things like that. And it also gets into some management information system stuff, into looking at the way information flows through a business and understanding that in detail, and a few other things as well. That's a degree, but it's a 2-year degree or certificates, I believe, as well. And you can usually get a job right after getting that. Networking is based on, there's a whole ton of different certificates, and I think there's a degree or two. And but again, you usually do just take it for 1 year or maybe 2 years, and then go out and get a job based on that. So networking is the simplest thing to understand about it is sometimes it actually involves the hardware of networking, that is stringing computers together with wires or making sure that they can be connected wirelessly. It also involves a lot of other stuff, though. There's a whole bunch about security with networking, where you have to make sure that you have all these different users and they all have different logins and passwords, and they have to be able to share the same printers, for example, or maybe sometimes the same files, and you have to be able to keep the updates consistent across all of them, and yet they have to not be able to get into each other's files. So there's a whole bunch of things that go on with that. You have to understand how the internet works and how information is transferred in data packets from one computer to another, all sorts of complicated, fairly technical stuff. Now, most of these, one of the things that you can do if you get our degree is you can also get certificates along the way, or certifications, not from SOC, but from other places. Our curriculum is closely aligned with the Cisco company, which makes the most important manufacturer of networking stuff in the world, and so or one of the most for sure. And so they have certifications in networking that if you take our curriculum, you've taken stuff that's very, very similar to what they do, and you can go get yourself certified from them on the strength of what we've taught you in most cases, I believe, and then you can use that to further jobs. Programming, unlike the other two, is aimed at as a transfer degree. In other words, you probably can't get a job in the area of programming after just 2 years here. You probably will have to go on to a university and get a 4-year degree, a bachelor's in computer science or in business information systems or something like the computer information systems or something like that. So when you do programming here, and the entry-level class, the gateway class for this is CIS 150, which is this class. Now, when you take programming here, you're going to end up, when you transfer, you're going to want to transfer to one of two very different types of schools. And based on that, you're going to want to take different gen eds here. So we have what's called a technical track and a business track. The technical track is aimed at those who want to transfer into engineering schools and get a degree in computer science proper. And that's that is technical stuff. It's very mathematical, very engineering related. You'll take some higher level math. You'll take some very high level of computer science theory. It won't all be programming. It'll be a lot of stuff about understanding very abstract stuff about programs and about computers and so on. The other thing that a lot of people do is they go into business programming, and for that they often go to different schools in different sections of the university. So they actually go to the business school usually, or the business college, and within a university, and that gets more into, it does a little bit less technical stuff in terms of the engineering, but it gets more into, again, management and the way information flows within a business, and a lot of different related things to that. So you'll probably want to go to either a technical track or a business track as a 4-year degree, and either way you'll take the same 4 basic computer programming courses here at SOC. You'll just take slightly different gen eds to prepare you for whichever one you're going to. So here are the 4 main computer programming classes at SOC. The first semester you'll take CIS 150, which we're talking about. The second semester you'll take CIS 207, and then the following fall, the third semester, you'll take CIS 208, and also a math course, Math 230. And then the following spring, you won't take any CIS courses, but you'll take other gen eds. So CIS 150 we're talking about. CIS 207 and 208 are a 2-semester sequence that's taught. They're designed to be taught together, and they cover C++, but they also cover data structures and algorithms, which is something you're expected to know if you're transferring to a 4-year university. Some universities teach C++, some universities teach Python, some teach other programming languages. They don't care as long as you've taken this sequence at the same college, they'll let you transfer. So if you take CIS 207 and 208 here and pass them both, they can transfer as a unit to wherever you're going. Now, if you just take 207 here and then move on to the other college, they may not accept that. They may make you start the whole sequence over when you take their equivalent to CIS 208. It's, again, not just learning to program or not just learning a programming language. It's learning about this data structures algorithm stuff. It's some theory behind things, which is important. Math 230 is discrete math, which is a math related to engineering and computer science. It's a fairly high-level math course, and you can take that as well, and then that can help. A lot of times it saves you one class that you have to take when you transfer. Okay. Let's come back to this issue of being a paper and pencil course. What we're actually going to be doing, as I said, you're going to be just writing things down in paper and pencil form. That means we're not using a particular programming language. In the next semester in CIS 207, we're going to use the language C++. In the past, we've used different languages. Some people use Python, as I said, Java. Pascal used to be a language a long time ago that people used a lot. C is often used, Fortran occasionally, and so on. COBOL every so often, and so on. All these different languages The thing that's in common is you have to have a language which follows very, very strict rules, and your programs have to be written down in that language. Now, since we're doing everything in paper and pencil form, we don't have a specific programming language like that, but you're still going to have something like that. There are going to be very strict rules for us about how you write your programs, and you're going to write them in two forms. In the first 6 or 7 weeks, we're going to use flowcharts, which are diagrams connected by arrows, and there's a lot of rules for how they look and what has to be in them. And in the last half of the semester, we're going to use Pseudocode, which is kind of a combination between an English and a programming language. So both of these are going to be good enough for what we're trying to teach. And then when we get to 207, we're going to translate all that into C++ specifically, and you'll see how it works there. Now, why do we do it this way? Why don't we set you on computers right away? Well, the basic story is that there's two different ways that schools have tried to teach programming, and they both work somewhat well, but I am convinced that this is the better way to do it. First of all, if you're in a 4-year university, chances are that what they'll do is they'll teach you programming using a programming language the very first semester. So you'll start taking C++, and then you'll move on to take a second semester of C++, which will be sort of the equivalent of our CIS 208 partly, but then you'll take the third semester, which gets into the data structures and algorithms. And so that's the way it's often done at 4-year universities. In community colleges, they frequently do it the way we're doing it. They have a pre-programming logic class first, which is our CIS 150, and they don't even use a specific programming language. Then when they get to the second semester, they start teaching the programming language. But here's what goes on. Programming in general involves two different questions. It involves the question of how you design the program in the first place. That's called algorithm design. An algorithm is the plan or the strategy, the steps that your program is going to follow without talking specifically about how it's being stated. And then secondly, they have to do what's called coding it. To code a program or to code an algorithm is to take the steps you have in mind and actually put them into the language that you're using. So a lot of times programmers spend most of their time designing the algorithm for something, and once they've designed it, then they just have to code it in the appropriate language. So you might design an algorithm independently of the language and then code it both in C++ and Fortran, for example. It's not quite that straightforward. A lot of people do, but basically you can split things up this way and think about coding as putting things in the language itself, and algorithm design is sort of the process of programming behind the scenes before that. Now, it's the programming part that's the hardest. Coding is not as difficult. There's some ways in which it's quite difficult, but coding mostly is not as difficult for people to learn, at least not as difficult to learn on their own. But programming is the difficult part. So what we're doing, we're focusing on the programming part, the algorithm part in CIS 150. And then when we get to 207, we'll assume you already know all that, and we'll move pretty quickly through C++, picking all the rest of it up just by showing you, all right, now you know how to do loops, now let's code them in C++. Now you know how to do if-then statements, now let's code them in C++. So schools that do it all together, what happens is the first semester, they're mixing teaching the programming and teaching the coding. And what I've found out is that when I've taught both ways. When I taught under that system, sometimes that caused more confusion for students than they needed to have, because they were learning two different skills. One was the skill of writing the program in terms of designing the algorithm, figuring out what steps to go through. And the other one was the skill of coding. And what happened is they would mix the two up and think they were missing one part when they were missing the other. I'd have people come to my office hours and say, I know exactly what to do, but I can't get it to work in Pascal. And we sit down and talk about it, and they were wrong. It wasn't that they didn't know how to get it to work in Pascal, it's that they didn't have a clear idea of what they were even trying to do. And I would say, no, your problem isn't the coding, your problem is you don't even know what the algorithm is. And somebody else would say, I can't even figure out what the algorithm is. And I would say, well, what have you got? And they'd show it to me, and they had a beautiful algorithm. And I would say, well, you're missing the semicolon here. And they would say, oh. And we put the semicolon in, and it would all work. And I would say, your problem wasn't that you didn't understand their algorithm. It's just that you didn't have the coding correct. You were being sloppy with the way the language is you were using the language. So I find that if we do it the way we do it in our school, where we separate the programming language design first, the algorithm design, I mean, from the using the language and coding, it actually makes for a slightly easier transition for people. And in the long run, we cover about the same amount of material. So that's why we do it this way. Now, if you enjoy programming, you'll probably enjoy this course, because even though we don't use computers, all the logic of it is still the same. The only disadvantage of this, and it is a disadvantage, and so you need to know it's here, is that there are a few people who really don't get programming logic even until they can see it working on the computer. And you're going to have to sort of take my word for that here, because you won't see it working on the computer for the most part. And for you, if you can get through this course, then when you get to 207 and you actually have a computer to try it on, it'll be like a breath of fresh air. You'll think, finally, I'm getting to see this. But you should know that's how this works. All right, programming is fairly difficult, especially this algorithm design part. it takes a lot of, it's very difficult. There's kind of an inverted bell curve. A lot of times people, it's weird. I teach in this classes, and a lot of times about half the class finds it super difficult. They struggle like crazy with it. They may really enjoy it, but they struggle like crazy with it at the beginning. It takes them a long time to figure it out. They usually do figure it out. It's a course that most people can pass if they're interested in doing so. And they usually do, but it takes a long time. And then the person sitting right next to them is finding it so easy they can't even understand why anybody's struggling. They just think it's really obvious. One year I asked 2 different students how long it took them to do an assignment. And one of them said it took him 10 minutes, and the other one said it took him 17 hours. Now, I'm not sure I believe either one of them. I think the 10 minutes guy was probably exaggerating, and it probably took more closer to half an hour. And I think the 17-hour guy was exaggerating the other direction. It just felt like 17 hours. It probably was closer to like 5 or 6 hours or something. But the point is the same. People respond very differently to the question of programming. Some people really find it natural and pick it up very quickly. Some people find it very difficult and have a hard time with it. So I can get you through this class if you want to, no matter which end of the bell curve you're on, I believe. But what you may find at the end of the class is that if you're the person who struggles with it, the question is whether you end up figuring it out and liking it by the end of the semester. You might get to the end of the semester and say, I hate this stuff with a passion. Let me go anywhere else but here and do anything else with this. And in that case, I guess it's good to know within one semester. Most of the time, though, a lot of you will enjoy this stuff. If you're finding this easy, at the beginning, it will seem easiest, especially these first 2 or 3 weeks as we're doing online stuff. You'll be wondering partly why we're going so slowly. But remember, the person next to you may not find this slow at all. And secondly, don't underestimate it. I'm building every concept a piece at a time. And if you get everything straight, then you'll be surprised how quickly we get to fairly complex stuff. About halfway through the semester, you're writing some tricky things. And you just don't notice that they've become tricky as quickly as they have. By the way, math is a good predictor of how well you'll do here. You don't need any mathematical background to do programming, really, at least at our level. And you certainly don't even need any computer background to do programming at our level. The real predictor, though, is how good you are at math. The kind of people who are good at math tend to be good at programming. The kind of people who struggle in math tend to struggle in programming. And the reason isn't because it takes math. The reason is because they both do the same thing. Both programming and mathematics require you to be good at 2 different skills at once. One is the skill of looking at something and getting a big picture understanding of the logical pattern of it. It's being able to see the big picture, see the big idea, and keep that in clear focus all the time. And that's a very important part of programming. But the other important part of programming is being able to be really meticulous about the details, get every little piece done exactly correctly. And so that's also very important. Now, most people tend to be either big idea people or detail people. And the big idea people struggle with the details in programming, and the detail people struggle with the big ideas in programming. But if you like both, and if you like switching back and forth between the two, you're probably a natural programmer. I, by the way, am a big idea person more than a detail person. I really had to learn to deal with the details. I'm not as natural a programmer as some of you guys. I can probably outprogram any of you while you're here, but if you went on and became a professional programmer, some of you would come back and be much better than I am because of the detail abilities you have that I don't necessarily have as naturally. Okay. The course itself is based on doing programming problems, that is, writing programs for things. There's probably, I think, 11 programming assignments, and every one of them will be, here's a problem, write a program for it. Here's a problem, write a program for it. And you'll write it on paper, turn it in on paper. You can do it electronically, but I mean, you won't do it on a computer and with a computer programming. And I will be the computer. I'll basically look at it and say, this will work or this won't work for these reasons. I'll give you lots of feedback. And that's what at least half the course grade will come from, is those assignments. I'll drop the lowest one. And then the other thing is there's 3 tests. There's 2 tests during the middle of the semester and 1 final exam. And the tests will each have 4, 5, 6 problems on them that are, guess what? Programming problems, just a little bit shorter so that you can do them quickly on paper on the test. So basically the whole semester is programming problems. And we're going to do in class lots and lots of programming problems, especially once we get away from the online section, you're back in class with me. I'll have you do a bunch of stuff on the board in groups. I'll have you do stuff at your tables in groups. I'll stand at the board and have you call out lines of code for me and see where we go with it. We'll just do lots and lots of programming. That's the way to learn this stuff. We will use the textbook, but not a ton. But we won't use it for about 5 weeks, except this first week. So here's what I'd like you to do. This first week, read chapter 1 of the textbook. Just read it. See if it all makes sense. It gives you a background of how computers work a little bit. I think it talks a little bit about programming languages in general and programming in general. It talks about variables, some of the other stuff we're going to be talking about as we go. And after that, we're going to set aside for about 5 weeks because I like to build the course in a slightly different order than the textbook does. And when we're done about 5 or 6 weeks in, right after the first test, then we'll come back to the textbook, or actually just before the first test, we'll come back to the textbook and sort of align what it's been saying with what I've been saying. And from there on, we'll use it a little bit more. But mostly it won't be used a ton, which is why I tried to keep to a fairly inexpensive one if I could. But you do read the first chapter of it, but don't worry about it yet for about 5 more weeks after that. Let me say something about plagiarism. You are not allowed to do each other's work. So here's what that means. It means if you've been given a program to write, and your friend is in the class and trying to write the same program, you may talk with each other about general ideas. I wonder if we should use a loop here. I wonder if we should read this part of the data first, or multiply these things. What you may not do is share flowcharts or pseudocode with each other. You can't say, here's my program, look at it and follow it, or let me see yours and see what you're doing. That's cheating as far as I'm concerned. If I catch you doing it, I will come down pretty hard on it. So don't share the code you've written, the programs you've written with somebody else for any assignment while the due date hasn't happened yet. Now, once something's been is due and they've turned it in, then you're welcome to go back and share your old assignments with each other. And you're also welcome to share examples. Like if you're saying, I don't know how to do this problem, and your friend says use a loop, and you say, I don't understand loops, he's welcome to say, let me show you a loop for another problem and show you how it works. But don't share code directly with each other. If I find that you're doing that, I will come down hard on it. Let me just walk through the Canvas page quickly and then talk about what's coming up later in the week in videos, and that will be it for now. So here's the Canvas page. It's probably too small to see here on the screen. I just want to point out the main elements of it. The home page, which is right here, is it has the syllabus at the top if you want to click to see it, and then it has basically a schedule of all the things, all the important events, including everything that's due. So you can see here that assignment 1 is due on Friday, August 30th. That's a week and a half from now. Assignment 2 is due the Friday after that, and then assignment 3 basically a Tuesday or so, Tuesday a week and a half after that. And after that, they're about once per week. So that's the first thing to see. The second thing is, if you look on the right, down below they have the assignments. They have the breakdown of how the assignments are weighted in the final grade. So 40% programming assignments, 30% the tests, 20% the final exam, 10% attendance and participation, which adds up to 100. The second thing to look at over on the left is modules. Oh, by the way, so when you're turning in an assignment, turn it in electronically. Click on where it says Assignment 1 Algorithms, and it will take you to a description of the assignment, usually, right there in the assignment itself. And then it doesn't show up here right now because I'm not a student in the class, I'm a teacher, but there will be a place where you can actually attach a file, or you can copy something directly into a text box, and you can submit whatever you want me to grade. Once we get in class, you're also welcome to send things to submit things in hard copy form. You can always send me, if you need to, pictures of things with your phone. Just submit it again using the submit button there, or if you have to, email it to me through Canvas. Anyway, so that's how you submit things. If you look on the left-hand side, you can also click on modules, and modules will be all the different lecture handouts. We won't have a ton of them, but we'll have a few. So there's a couple that we're going to look at this week about algorithms and variables, and there's the video lectures are going to show up there too. So under attendance is where I keep attendance. For the first 3 weeks, I'm not worried about attendance, but I will be checking to make sure that you're participating in the class. And if you're not participating in the class actively, I may count it as not attending. I may require you to send me some sort of email just to say hello, just so that I can mark officially with a state that you are attending. Grades is as you'd expect. The nice thing about grades here is that you can actually, it doesn't show it here because I'm not in as a student, but as a student you can go to your grade and you can actually plug in things. You can plug in guesses. You can say, suppose I got a 50 on the test, what would I have for a grade? Suppose I got a 90 on the test, what would I have for a grade? Announcements will be for announcements when they happen. NetTutor is not something I set up, but the school sets up an automatic free tutoring service called NetTutor in various subjects. I don't know whether there's anything in programming logic or not. It's possible that there is. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to tell you is where we're going next. I just wanted to give you this for now. over the next couple of days, probably maybe not even till Thursday, we'll see, I'm going to give you several more short videos which correspond to the first week's worth of lectures. We're going to talk about algorithms. We're going to talk about the programming process. I'm going to show you what it looks like to write a program using C++. We're going to talk about variables. Somewhere along the line, we will have the first assignment, and I'll explain it. So by the end of the week, I'll have explained what the first assignment involves, and then it will be due a week later. Now, that first assignment, you probably should wait before you turn it in until you've seen my videos, because a lot of people are capable of doing it but don't know what the instructions mean, because they depend on some very specific stuff I'm going to go over in the videos. So wait on that till I talk about it in the videos this week, and then it'll be due the following week. And that'll be sort of the pattern. I'll try to release things on time to give you plenty of time to do the assignments, but you'll want to be following closely to see what kinds of videos show up. The week that I come back to class on September 16th or 9th or so, we can have a big review, and you can tell me if there's anything you're really mixed up on, and I can sort of try to clarify anything that needs clarifying. So in the meantime, hold off for now until I send you more videos. And that'll probably be in the next couple of days, so that you know, sort of have the material for the first week of class. But welcome to class, and I hope you have a great time with it, and turn out to really love this stuff and do really well with it.